looking, throwing in the end zone.
Montana, touchdown, John Taylor.
Young to the air, Young to Jerry Rice, touchdown San Francisco.
Young stumbles on the way back and fires up the middle. Pass is caught by Owens.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm your host, Al Moriello. This is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis, plus timely and entertaining sports and pop culture topics. And today we're going to be addressing the Brandon Aiyuk trade rumors that have been swirling for the past week. We're going to discuss free agent additions the 49ers made recently. I'm going to call this Wave 2 of free agency, along with Wave 2 re-signings, players that are re-signing to the 49ers roster for 2024. And then we're going to go ahead and rank the outside free agent additions and rank the internal free agent re-signings by the team. In the plus section, I'm going to discuss FX's fabulous show, Shogun, Star Wars, The Bad Batch on Disney Plus, and the upcoming Star Wars show, The Acolyte. The trailer just dropped, and I have some thoughts about that as well. But like always, it starts with the Niners, so let's get right into it.
Let's talk Niners.
So we're not even close to draft season. It is still about 5 weeks away, but we are full swing into bullshit season. And that's starting with the rumors that Brandon Aiyuk may get traded, and two teams that were discussed as possible trade partners, the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So let's just take them one by one. And before, I kind of go into that, you guys know my stance. I don't believe Brandon Aiyuk will be traded. I think anytime you guys hear this or see this on social media, I would just ask yourselves a simple question. Does Brandon Aiyuk getting traded make the 49ers a better team in 2024? And if the answer is no, which it is, then he's not going to get traded because they are in the middle of a Super Bowl window, 2024, and I'll argue 2025 as well, and before Brock Purdy's extension really kicks in and potentially cripples some aspects of the team's cost allocation. Brandon Aiyuk has come out and said he will not play, at least reports are that he will not play on his fifth-year contract, which is $14 million guaranteed, that he wants an extension, and he'll probably hold out of camp like Nick Bosa did a couple years ago. Again, that's a huge nothing burger. He wants long-term security. I get it. And the Niners, in the past, like with the Nick Bosa and others, the extensions, even Fred Warner, have drawn out into the summer. And that's when both sides really get serious about coming together on a mutually beneficial contract. But if John Lynch and Parag Marath and Kyle Shanahan know they want Brandon Aiyuk back, they should get working on it now. You don't want to wait until the summer and then he comes in out of shape like all players do, has a down year, and they're going to wonder, is he worth it? It happened to Debo, it happened to Bosa. It could happen to Aiyuk, as well. If you want Brandon Aiyuk, get his ass signed. You know what it's going to come. It's going to come between $23 and maybe $27 million a year. And the way average annual value doesn't mean anything. It's all about guaranteed money, what the cap hits are going to be for certain years. And as you know, if he does get extended, it could lower his 2024 cap hit from 14 all the way down to $4 million. So they can save 10 additional $1 million by extending him. San Francisco is currently, with their re-signings, apparently $13 million under the salary cap. They made a bunch of restructures in the past week. Javon Hargrave, George Kittle. And there was an announcement that they had a payroll clinical error at the end of the season. And the NFL took away their 2025 fifth-round draft pick and moved this upcoming year's fourth-round pick from where it was to the bottom of the round, which was really only, I think, moving it 5 or 6 or 7 slots. Not a huge deal. But Aiyuk is playing the leverage game like Deebo Samuel did before him. And I don't actually recall, even though it was only 2 years ago, what Nick Bosa, or last offseason, what Nick Bosa was doing, if he was scrubbing anybody from his social media or, saying anything, having relatives out there like Brandon Aiyuk's brother and his fiance about last game in San Francisco. There's no need to do that. It's just, it looks stupid. I know we're dealing with early to mid 20-year-olds and it's a different mindset. And there is, regardless of what you want to say, there's ego, there's a sense of entitlement about, how good they are. Everybody believes that they're better than they are in anything, not just athletes, even just lay workers like us. At our jobs, we always think, the place will fall apart if I'm not out there. It'll keep moving along, just like the Niners will keep moving along if Aiyuk's not there. But it would hinder and be a significant hit on the offense because behind him and Deebo, there are no starter-worthy receivers. So that doesn't mean it puts the Niners in a pickle in terms of they have to sign him. They need to sign him because he is a top 10 receiver. He's the best receiver on the team. He developed a really nice chemistry with Purdy. Last year, 75 receptions, over 1,300 yards. And I know he wasn't happy about only having 3 catches in the Super Bowl. He was targeted another 3 or 4 times. And kudos to the Chiefs cornerbacks locking down Deebo and Aiyuk. And maybe, Shanahan didn't have as many man beaters in the game plan as perhaps he should have. Or they weren't dialed up at the right time or whatever. Aiyuk's best chance for winning a Super Bowl is in San Francisco when you're comparing him to Jacksonville and Pittsburgh. And the Jaguars rumor was interesting. They said that they wanted, it was thrown out there that the Niners wanted the Jaguars' first round pick, which was in the middle of the round, plus receiver Zay Jones. Zay Jones is nice, but he's a journeyman receiver. There was no compensation discussed about what Pittsburgh would have given up for him, but it did make waves when Brandon Aiyuk added Mike Tomlin and said, "Oh, hey, Coach Tomlin, people say that we look alike. What do you think?" And I don't know if Tomlin responded. I don't know if he can respond, if that's considered tampering. I'm not sure what the actual legalities are in terms of responding to players, even just on social media. So he might not have been able to respond, or he did, and I didn't see it, whatever. Every little move a player makes is going to be magnified. What he does say, what he doesn't say, what a family member or a friend says. It's all part of the tap dancing game, and it's unfortunate bullshit because it doesn't need to happen. Either he's going to get signed or he's going to get traded, and none of this stuff matters from a leverage standpoint. Think about it, right? It's really juvenile type of stuff. If you don't want to be with your current team, and this just goes beyond Brandon Aiyuk, then just come out and say, listen, I want to explore, spread my wings elsewhere. Can you help me out and let's work out a trade. And people are saying that's what Deebo wanted to do a couple years ago. He didn't want to be in San Francisco. No, he did. He did. Deebo took a pretty childish approach because if he did not want to sign with San Francisco, they could have found a place to trade him. They're not going to keep an absolute malcontent, no matter how good of a player, how good of a gadget player, how unique of a player Deebo is. They're not going to keep a malcontent on the team just because he got the money he was looking for, because there still could be that animosity, lack of work ethic, etc., which I don't see from Deebo, and I don't think I've seen from Brandon Aiyuk either. I think the moral of the story here is just because someone says something, and whether it's someone from the Jaguars, remember that the Jaguars GM is Trent Baalke, former 49er GM, could have leaked this. And just because someone says there's trade interest, it could solely be trade interest on the Jaguars end, on the Steelers end. Remember, on the Ravens end, asking or inquiring the 49ers if Deebo Samuel was available for a trade, and they said no. And it sounds like, at least right now, the 49er management, Lynch and Shanahan, said no to Brandon Aiyuk getting traded. They're going to, I shouldn't say anything definitively. I truly, truly believe they're going to extend Brandon Aiyuk. It makes the most sense to me. They have no salary cap issues for 2024. John Lynch has come out and said that they do look at the cap, a couple of years ahead to make sure they're in decent financial shape. Well, they only have 32 players under contract for 2025, and there are already $10 million over the cap. So they will need to do something next year, 2025, but that's 2025. They are all in again to win a Super Bowl. And again, I'll ask the rhetorical question since it's a one-way podcast. Are the 49ers a better team in 2024 if they trade Brandon Aiyuk? The answer is no. Even if they draft a receiver, and then that's going to be the common refrain. Well, they could get that salary off the books. They could draft a receiver. The draft is an absolute 50-50 coin flip. Rashawn Woods, remember him? Drafted first-round receiver. Did not work out. AJ Jenkins, remember drafted out of, was it Illinois or whatever? He was terrible. Did not work out. Those are two, the Rashawn Woods one's probably going back about 20 years, but the Javon Kinlaw drafting after DeForest Buckner got traded. Javon Kinlaw was serviceable. It sucks for him that he was injured, and hopefully, he revives his career with the Jets. You don't know what you're getting. You know you have a 1,300-yard receiver in Brandon Aiyuk, and you need to pay him accordingly. It's 2 straight years over 1,000 yards. He needs to be paid like a top 10, top 7 receiver. He should not get Justin Jefferson money, who hasn't signed an extension yet. He should not get Tyreek Hill money, but he can get around. Debo's, I think, averaging 23 a year. If you give him 24, 25, is that going to cause any bad blood between anybody? No. Again, it's all about guarantees. And if that's the case, and Debo puts up a stink, you trade him after this upcoming season because, again, the cap hit or the trade hit is favorable for San Francisco, more favorable if they trade him next year, either before or after June 1st. Plus, next year is his last year under contract for Debo Samuel. He's going to be 29 or 30. He's not going to age well the way he plays. So you keep the band together for 2024. That's why the entire offense is back. And we're going to get into offensive linemen re-signings in a second. Could Aiyuk be traded? Anything is possible. But I would highly doubt anytime you see something on social media, where is Aiyuk going to end up? If you want to make some easy money, I would say put some money on San Francisco if a sports book is allowing you to bet where Aiyuk is going to play in 2024. They will get it done. Just because they're not getting it done in March doesn't mean he's going to get traded. Just because they don't get it done in April or May or June does not mean he's getting traded. They will get it done before training camp starts or thereabouts. Or, and this is it's always possible they could trade him if someone offers San Francisco an absolute king's ransom, where you're talking about like a Russell Wilson type of trade, but commensurate for a receiver, then San Francisco may have to think about it, or maybe they pivot and say, do you want Debo instead? Because I really wonder in their heart of hearts, Lynch and Shanahan, if you had to keep one, who would you keep? I would keep Brandon Aiyuk. And I would wager the majority of people listening to this podcast would keep Aiyuk as well. It is nothing against Debo. He is a fantastic player. He is going to age worse. His style of game will age worse than Brandon Aiyuk's. And Brandon Aiyuk is a true number 1 receiver. Debo is a good number 2 receiver and obviously a gadget receiver, but I think you can find the gadgetiness in a draft or a free agent. Hell, remember Laviska Shenault of the Carolina Panthers? I think he's a free agent. If Debo somehow gets traded tomorrow, you sign Shenault and he can run the bubble screens or the handoffs or whatever Debo was running to 80% of Debo's ability. Is there that much of a drop-off? And you could probably get him for $3, $4, $5 million versus, whatever Debo's cap hit is, 20 plus million. But I truly don't believe Aiyuk is going anywhere. It's just noise. We're getting, close to dead time. in the NFL, the month between free agency and the draft, dead time. People are just going to strum up things to talk about, which I guess I am as well. But I'm hoping common sense and logic prevails for the 49ers management, for Brandon Aiyuk, and for folks that are listening or reading stuff on social media. I really don't see him going anywhere. But let's talk about some transactions that were made. We're going to call it outside free agents wave 2. So new 49ers in no particular order. The Niners signed from the Arizona Cardinals linebacker / safety, but apparently he is a linebacker, Ezekiel Turner. Has some experience playing safety as well, would be light as a linebacker, about 210, 215 pounds. But the Niners have those hybrid players like a Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles. Even Fred Warner played some safety at BYU in college. So they are starting with the numbers game at linebacker to try to fill the hole that Dre Greenlaw's injury is going to leave at least into the first month of the season. But that was not the only linebacker they signed. Ex-Packer Devondre Campbell signed a 1-year deal. That was after former Charger linebacker Kendricks backed out and signed with the Cowboys. I think this is a good backup plan. Campbell was someone that was either a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro, I think, in 2021. So 2 years removed, but again, late 20s, not a really older player. He said that the Packers really misused him, and he is ready to show San Francisco and the fans, what they're paying for and what type of player he is. More of a threat to start next to Fred Warner than Ezekiel Turner is, or really anybody else on the roster. So this could be a plug-and-play starter for the first month plus of the regular season on defense. Cornerback Chase Lucas from the Detroit Lions, gunner, smaller cornerback, about 5'10", 5'11", 180, 185 pounds. Not sure how this is going to shake out on the actual roster given the cornerbacks they have. Another cornerback that I'm going to discuss momentarily that they brought in. Could they give, Lucas some looks as the backup slot corner to Diamador Lenore? That's definitely a possibility. But I'm sure they're going to draft a corner, and there's going to be some undrafted free agent rookies. Who knows what else the Niners do between now and when the training camp roster is set. But right now, a potential special teams addition. And Chase Lucas isn't someone that sees the field on defense all that much, so his utilization might be limited just to special teams. We'll see how that shakes out when people are looking to be the 5th or 6th potential corner on the roster. Another cornerback signed, Isaac Yiadom, former New Orleans Saint, was generally a backup, but started the last half of the season and played very well for the New Orleans Saints. Big, long corner, 6'1", close to 200 pounds. Has the measurables the Niners are looking for outside opposite Charvarius Ward. A little bit bigger than Ambry Thomas. I don't care if someone's bigger, smaller, fatter, can't speak English, doesn't understand football. I want someone other than Ambry Thomas on the outside, and Isaac Yiadom has a shot at least to compete against Thomas, against second-year player Darrell Luther, and I'm sure a rookie that's going to be brought in. But the MO of this coaching staff is liking veterans that have experience, snaps under their belt. It's why Devondre Campbell was brought in. This is why an Isaac Yiadom was brought in. Even if it's a backup, if he could be behind Charvarius Ward and they find someone adequate opposite him on the other side to start, and maybe Luter is behind him, that's all well and good, but they're not going to infuse a bunch of rookies, and certainly not any undrafted free agents or unproven players, onto a win-now roster, especially in starting spots. But there is a place for Isaac Yiadom. It's just a matter of, is it a starting spot? Is it a backup spot? But at least he will be able to compete. And his good showing the latter half of last season is promising as we look ahead to 2024. Offensive tackle Brandon Parker, formerly with the Raiders, was not able to stay healthy the past 2 years. Now he's coming to San Francisco, which, at least for 2023, was able to shake the injury bug rap some, at least in terms of extensive injuries, until the Super Bowl. Then a bunch of injuries happened. I would look at him as a camp body. He could assume the Matt Pryor second swing tackle role, because the first swing tackle role is Jalen Moore, but a body that's out there to compete for a backup spot. And last but not least, a backup quarterback has been found. Josh Dobbs, formerly of the Minnesota Vikings, who had one of the more interesting seasons in recent NFL quarterback memory, starting the year in Cleveland, getting traded before the season to Arizona, starting there until Kyler Murray was healthy, guiding the Cardinals to a couple wins, playing some very respectable football, getting traded to Minnesota after Kirk Cousins gets injured, guiding the Vikings to some wins, playing some very respectable football, until he then got benched and the Vikings went with Nick Mullins and another quarterback for their last couple of games before they faded out of the playoff hunt. Josh Dobbs is a veteran, smart, literally a rocket scientist, accurate player that has upside with some mobility. I think he will fit in very nicely in San Francisco, at least this year, considering what former backup quarterback got signing with the Minnesota Vikings, got a 1-year, $10 million deal. I don't know how much of that was guaranteed, but Dobbs is coming in at about $2.5 million, and Brandon Allen signed for about $1.5 million. So a replacement, Dobbs and Darnold swapping jerseys from Minnesota to San Francisco. If Purdy stays healthy, again, this is, my new favorite phrase, a big nothing burger. But to have Dobbs, obviously picks up things quickly, picked up 3 systems quickly, Cleveland, Arizona, and Minnesota, functional in all 3 stops. And I'm sure he'll pick up Kyle Shanahan's system rather quickly as well. And if not, Brandon Allen is still here. So there's a battle for the actual number 2 quarterback spot. So either Allen, who's going to be in the system for a second year, or Josh Dobbs coming over from the Vikings. I would put my money on Dobbs, but it's an interesting thing to play out. And let's not close the door on a rookie coming in to potentially beat out one of these players and become the number 3 the way Purdy did 2 years ago, because it then gives the 49ers a very cheap, cost-controlled, highly cost-controlled player on the roster for 4 years as a backup who's going to be making around $1 million a year. So the draft or an undrafted rookie free agent, someone can wow and push one of these 2 veterans off the roster. It's not off the table. So that's outside the organization signings, re-signings this past week. So linebacker Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles, after Kendricks backed out and signed with the Cowboys, the Niners went heavy on linebackers. So Devondre Campbell, Ezekiel Turner, and they brought back Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles. Familiar with the system, been with the team the past, 3 or 4 plus years. Coaching staff likes him. You could do a lot worse as your 4th or 5th linebacker. Again, someone that has, he's not going to be put into play safety, but someone that has that body type, that versatility and speed, that mind for coverage, which is important, dropping into zone or whatnot. Again, you can do worse as a potential 4th or 5th linebacker than Flannigan-Fowles. And wide receiver Chris Conley, who had some nice catches in the playoffs, back on a 1-year deal. I mean, really behind Debo and Aiyuk, there is no one, Juwan Jennings did sign his 1-year second-round tender, so he will be back. And I think that's signed and locked and loaded, and no one can negotiate with him, but I may be wrong on that. Please fact check me on that. But Chris Conley, if Debo or Aiyuk gets hurt, Conley would be in line to start because, at least to me, Juwan Jennings is not an outside receiver. I've said that before. He is very good in what he does as a big slot, averaging 26 catches a game. Ronnie Bell, not quite ready for that. Danny Gray, not quite ready for prime time. Either we'll see how they look in OTAs and mini camps and training camp and all that stuff. And I'm sure a rookie receiver is going to be brought in as well, because what the team is really lacking too is a kick and punt returner. Ronnie Bell, they tried that. Didn't go as well as it could have. Danny Gray, I don't know if he had any experience in college at SMU. So they could bring in a rookie specifically with that skill set in mind, who could still be, a viable 4th or 5th receiver. But Chris Conley, veteran presence, big-bodied receiver, good hands, savvy, still has speed, would be the number 3 receiver, meaning to me, if Debo or Aiyuk had to miss time, he would be an outside starting receiver. And I think that's good insurance to have, at least right now, because a lot can happen between now and the start of the regular season. So those are wave 2 signings and re-signings. Let's now actually just go through the exercise of ranking the outside free agents from worst to first. And even worst isn't terrible, but somebody's got to come in last, right? And the honor of that is offensive tackle Brandon Parker from the Raiders. Just looking at the injury history the past 2 years, the durability is a factor. It's not there. The Niners are taking a flyer on him, an available tackle, cheap, maybe someone that can slide into guard, potentially. So maybe he has some guard tackle flexibility, but it feels like a camp body, especially knowing that the Niners are going to draft 1, if not 2 offensive linemen. Remember, they have to think ahead. Jalen Moore this year is the last year of his contract. Spencer Burford's got only 2 years left. Aaron Banks, starting left guard. This is the last year of his contract as well. So if they're going to be cap strapped due to extensions or, the money they're allocating to other positions, the Niners need to get cheap but good and durable offensive linemen. That is probably going to come more through the draft than what Brandon Parker is going to offer as a free agent. Next up, Chase Lucas, that defensive back from the Lions. Great to bring in special teams help. Being a gunner on the smaller side. That's why I mentioned, could he help out backing up Lenore in the slot? He could, but I do think it's a position where the Niners are going to address in the draft someone that may have inside-outside flexibility. If they sign someone of a 5'10", 5'11", same body type as Lenore, they could be grooming him as the heir apparent because Deommodore Lenore and Charvarius Ward are on the last year of their contracts. And an extension will happen for one, probably not both, again, just given the cap situation that the Niners are going to have in 2025. Next, Ezekiel Turner, linebacker, safety hybrid. Right now he's probably linebacker 5 or 6 on the roster. He could beat out Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles. Again, similar body type, similar experience, having safety experience, could potentially stick on the roster. He is a veteran. The Niners could have looked to address linebacker in the draft, but again, they don't play young players. They're not totally sold on D. Winters or Jalen Graham, hence the Devondre Campbell signing, bringing in Ezekiel Turner as well, and bringing back Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles. I don't know where Turner is going to fall in that pecking order. Best case scenario, maybe the 4th or 5th linebacker. Next, Yatir Gross-Matos. I like the idea of a defensive end coming in. He got 2 years, $18 million. Obviously, not all of that is guaranteed. Felt a little high for the lack of productivity that he had in his first 4 years in Carolina. But $9 million a year, yeah, like I said last podcast, we're going to squibble over $1 or $2 million per year. Bigger defensive ends, 6'5", 265. They can move him inside as a D tackle on passing downs. They knew what they had in Ferrell, in Randy Gregory. They wanted to upgrade, and they felt like Gross-Matos was an upgrade over one of those 2 players. Next, defensive tackle Jordan Elliott, formerly of the Browns. one of the signings they made on the first day of free agency. Good depth. If he winds up being a depth piece, because I don't think he's going to start, I think he's a solid number 3 defensive tackle. Again, he started for the Browns the last 2 years, and this past year, the Browns were the number 1 defense and number 1 run defense far and away in the NFL. You don't become a starter on that defense unless you're pretty darn good. So I think he's going to add some pass rush, some run stuffing ability. I know he didn't grade out great from Pro Football Focus, but I think what they're going to ask him to do, and along with other additions on the D-line, and I think it'll fit and it'll help remold that defensive line to get back to pinning their ears back, getting to the quarterback when they have to, but becoming, again, a top 5 run defense unit. The way the Niners fell off the second half of the season and in the playoffs, that's unacceptable, hence 2 new defensive tackles. Next, I guess this would be 5th. The 5th best free agent signing linebacker, Devondre Campbell. Sometimes being a runner-up isn't that bad if Lance Kendrick's going to back out and go to the Cowboys. A player that's been a starter first couple years with Atlanta, last couple years with the Packers, been a Pro Bowler, been an All-Pro, playing next to Fred Warner is going to help. And if he is right that he was misused in Joe Barry's defense with Green Bay, hopefully Nick Sorenstam and Brandon Staley can put him in the right position, assuming Dre Greenlaw's role and potentially right now being penciled in a day 1 starter. Number 4, Isaac Yiadom. It's funny. I don't scout many players a ton. I'm not one of those that goes on Twitter and says, I broke down the film and this and that. And who knows how much those people are actually telling the truth. But I do mock drafts every year. And I do remember the year that he came out, which was, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. And I had him mocked to the 49ers a bunch of times because of that size, length, speed fit. And he just did not materialize into a starter in New Orleans until injury gave him an opportunity. And it happens with a lot of people. Hey, it happened to Brock Purdy. And he took advantage of that opportunity and parlayed it into a prove-it contract with the Niners. And the Niners are looking for a number 2 corner. It could still be Diamador Lenore on the outside if they find someone else, a rookie, or if they make any other signing to man the slot. But I think they like Lenore in the slot and they want to find someone a bit bigger on the boundary. And I'm more intrigued by the promise of what Yiadom brings from the Saints. And if he can keep that momentum, that solid play the last half of the season and really make a name for himself in training camp, in OTAs, and obviously leading up into the summer. So excited to see what he could bring to the secondary. Number 3, Josh Dobbs. Backup quarterbacks only matter if, God forbid, the starting quarterback gets hurt. For what Sam Darnold got, I think you got comparable production at literally a quarter of the price, $10 million compared to $2.5 million. Good signing on the, when we're going to call it $2.5 million a discount, but in the NFL, I guess it is, on the discount rack, as long as he picks up the system pretty quickly. And if Sam Darnold did, he was in the Jets system his first 3 years, and in Carolina for 1 year. If Sam Darnold could pick up Carolina's system and San Francisco's system, then I think Josh Dobbs can as well. I think it's good security behind Brock Purdy if indeed Dobbs does beat out Brandon Allen as the number 2 quarterback. The number 2 free agent signing, Malik Collins. You're getting an immediate borderline impact starter on the defensive line. He's signed for 2025. $10 million. It's all salary. Nothing's guaranteed. So if it works out well for the 49ers, even mid-year, they can look to extend him and bring down his cap hit and extend him for a year beyond 2025. And the draft compensation given up, a 7th round pick. A 7th round pick, other than Brock Purdy, usually is just a flyer that you're hoping someone can maybe stick to the bottom of your roster, or more realistically, your practice squad. They have a day 1 starter in Malik Collins, who played very well for the Houston Texans the past couple years. So slotting him alongside Javon Hargrave, next to Nick Bosa, and near our number one free agent signing, Leonard Floyd, defensive end, formerly of the Bills and the Rams, averaging at least 9.5 sacks the last 3 or 4 seasons. This is the most productive and certainly durable defensive end that Nick Bosa has played in since joining the 49ers. Even though he's not huge, 6'3", 240, sets the edge, pushes the pocket, has the speed to turn defensive tackles and force quarterbacks to step up. The best defensive end that Nick Bosa has played with. It's not the splash name. It's not Danielle Hunter. But you can get a significant amount of productivity from what Danielle Hunter got at approximately half the cost. That's what the Niners were doing in a lot of ways in free agency. I mean, a lot of 1-year deals. So, maybe half 1-year deals, half 2-year deals for this external free agent class. But they're weighing the risk reward and they're trying to get the most bang for their buck, which a team that has a lot of high-end, high-priced talent, especially starters, or obviously starters, they had some holes they needed to fill. Armstead's gone, brought in 2 defensive tackles, in Elliott and Collins. Defensive ends, all Chase Young, Cleveland Farrell, Randy Gregory gone. Brought in Leonard Floyd, brought in Yetur Gross-Matos. Dre Greenlaw goes down. So you have Ezekiel Turner coming in, Devondre Campbell coming in, a re-signing of Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles. They understand what the inflection points are on this roster, what the needs are, and obviously they should, right? It's roster building, roster management 101, but they're not hoping that a significantly lesser player can perform. A Leonard Floyd will perform. A Malik Collins will perform. A Devondre Campbell will. Hopefully an Isaac Yiadom could be a surprise at the number 2 cornerback spot. There weren't many holes to fill, but they filled them with moderately priced but high quality players. They may not be Pro Bowlers, they might not be all pro, but they're on one of the higher tiers when it comes to their respective positions. Not every signing can be an all pro or Pro Bowl player, guys. It just doesn't work out that way. Now let's quickly rank the re-signings of 49ers from last year's squad that re-upped. Again, worst to first, Brandon Allen, number 3 quarterback. Last year, probably number 3 quarterback again this year, although there will be a battle with Josh Dobbs. Brandon Allen knows the system. I think it's nice to have him back for about $1.5 million. The Niners are believing in carrying 3 quarterbacks, and I think Brandon Allen is going to, fill that role just as nicely this upcoming season as he did last season. Next would be Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles. Just simply put, you could do a lot worse as a 4th, 5th, or even 6th if they keep 6 linebackers on the roster. Than Flanagan-Fowles being in the system the last 3-4 years, knowing the cover 3, having experience with the team, having that athleticism, being a safety in college, transitioning to linebacker. You could certainly do worse. Next, Chris Conley. As I said earlier, having that starter ability should Debo or Aiyuk potentially go down. Tall, long, fast, reliable veteran receiver. I have him ranked ahead of Fowles and behind Ben Barch. So I thought, even though he's someone that really got next to no playing time, a good depth signing for either guard position or a center position. And if it is true, like we all assume it is, that this coaching staff likes veterans more so than rookies, then Barch has the opportunity to maybe supplant some rookies either as a starting guard, maybe the first to be backup center behind Jake Brendel, or maybe Feliciano moves to center. Barch would move to guard in case of injury. Smart, inexpensive re-signing. Kevin Givens at defensive tackle. Yeah, you could do a lot worse than Kevin Givens as your number 4 defensive tackle. And if the 49ers draft a D tackle, which I anticipate they would, Givens might be your 5th defensive tackle on the team. And you certainly can do worse than Kevin Givens. On the team, a bit undersized, 6'1", 280, so not a true nose, but has been part of a defensive line rotation that has historically, other than the latter half of this past season, been good against the run. And I think the number 1 internal 49er re-signing was John Feliciano. Came over on a 1-year deal from the Giants, and I think we all weren't sure what to expect from him, being a journeyman offensive lineman, but started off the season rotating in at right guard with Spencer Burford, then took over. You saw what happened in the Super Bowl when he came out, when he got injured in overtime. Burford missed his assignment, forcing Brock Purdy to throw it away, where the 49ers could have gotten a touchdown instead of a field goal in the overtime session. Is he guaranteed to be the starter? Potentially. Well, let's see what they do in the draft. If they draft a guard high or a tackle that could kick into guard for a year, there's going to be competition on the line. But to bring back the same 5 starters on the offensive line that they finished the season with, or played most of the season with, and they had the number 2 offense in the NFL, leading Christian McCaffrey to an Offensive Player of the Year award, that's a big step in running this thing back and having the same offensive productivity that they had a year ago. Nothing's guaranteed. Obviously, injuries, things can happen in training camp, preseason games. A rookie could look really good, beat out McKivitz, beat out Feliciano. Who knows? But baseline, you're bringing the same 5 back, which is certainly a plus. So that's going to conclude the 49ers section of the podcast. Stick around. We're going to be talking TV shows, Shogun, Xmen 97, The Bad Batch, and the trailer for the upcoming Star Wars series, The Acolyte. Stay with us.
It's plus time.
So I've been really pleasantly surprised by Shogun on FX Tuesday nights at 10 o'clock, also on Hulu. I remember seeing the previews for it, and I didn't really, jot down a note or make it mandatory that I had to remember to definitely watch Shogun when it released on FX. I more or less caught it a couple days after its premiere, and it is fantastic. For a network TV show, the production value is absolutely phenomenal. But taking a quick step back, if you're not familiar with what this is based on a novel. The novel's about 1,000 pages, and it's a series of novels taking place at different points in time in Japan, different parts of Asia, and this is, from what I understand, the first book in the series. And there was a miniseries in the 1980s about it that was highly acclaimed as well. So this is a redo, as it were. And it revolves around a British sailor who winds up marooned in 1600s Japan. He and his crew wind up being found. He is selected out of his crew to be brought in front of, the authorities in that Japanese province. And what ultimately winds up happening is he is getting caught up in the wider politics of Japan, as it's broken up into, I believe, 5 provinces. And the one region, its leader is going to be voted out of this kind of, circle of regions. And I don't want to give really too much away. And when that happens, he and his allies are essentially going to be killed. But this leader winds up finding this Englishman, and this person is Catholic, but not of the same faith, or Christian rather, but not of the same faith as Portuguese individuals who have brought Christianity to Japan. And I believe it's between Catholicism and Protestantism that there's a little bit of, well, not a little bit, but a big schism, at least in the 1600s in Europe. And England and Portugal are warring nations. So the Japanese leaders that are Christian have an issue with potentially putting this person to death. And the leader, one of the leaders has allied himself with this British person and is kind of using him politically to gain an army, attempting to become, supreme leader of Japan, and the title is Shogun. And I'm 5 episodes in. The series is primarily subtitled, so the Japanese actors and actresses are speaking Japanese. So that's in subtitles. Anything that's in English is in English. The production value is rivaling something like a Game of Thrones, a House of the Dragon, any of the high quality series on Amazon Prime or Netflix. And I don't want to say it's super surprising that FX is doing this. I mean, in one case, it makes sense since they're getting this revenue stream from the advertisers, the ads that are shown during the program. It makes sense fiscally there, but to see something that's not, rated R, adult situations, nudity, cursing, excessive violence, which, there is warring factions here, but it's not by any means over the top gore. Tastefully done, extremely well done. Each episode's about an hour and 20 minutes. So when you take away commercials, you have a solid hour of story. And it's an hour that goes by quickly, at least for me. And a 1,000-page book. And this is something, reading on social media, Reddit, that where a lot of people have read the book. I've never read the book, and I still have no desire to read the book, although I'm going to obviously finish the series. People kind of unanimously are enjoying this show. Are there things left out? Of course. When you're talking about a 1,000-page book, if that was narrated, that might be 30 hours worth of narration in an audiobook. So there's only so much you can do in either 8 or 10 episodes, 8 or 10 total hours. Ignorance is bliss in this regard. For me, I think it's really well done, but that's obviously aligning with a lot of other people, what a lot of other people think, and the critics as well. So if it's something that you're looking to watch, if you're interested in period pieces, I would highly recommend Shogun. And we'll see if there's a lesson that Hollywood learns here, if they are automatically going to think, oh, let's keep adapting the next couple books in this series, or we want more Japanese or Asian type stories. It's not that, guys. It's not that. People will watch well-made, captivating shows. If it's quality and it looks like quality, people will check it out. And it's apparently, on streaming, it's leading streaming original series ratings for the past couple weeks on Hulu, beating out anything on Netflix or Amazon Prime or Apple. And this obviously is something that broadcasts, I believe, first on FX before it gets to Hulu. People will watch quality. Don't just try to make an imitation or a sequel just because this is popular. No one's going to listen to me, obviously. But if it's quality, people will watch. It might not be for the premiere episode, but they will eventually get there. And talking about a redo or a reboot, next let's go to animation. Xmen 97 released yesterday on Disney Plus, a continuation of the mid to late 90s X-Men cartoon. And I don't know if this supposedly picks up where the original series left off. And I remember watching that I guess it released when I was in high school. They kept the same intro, the same cast of characters. One of the main characters is a male character named Morph, and he's essentially someone who could transform into other people. So think of a male version of Mystique. And he was killed in the original series pilot episode and then brought back later on, but now he's part of the title characters. as part of the core group of X-Men. But between Cyclops, Jean Grey, Rogue, Gambit, Wolverine, Beast, and Jubilee and Morph, I think those are the 8. That's your cast. The episode was a 2-episode premiere. And now I'm going to give spoilers, but if you want to skip ahead, just skip ahead, a minute or so. It opens up with, you learn this in the first 30 seconds, Charles Xavier is dead. He was assassinated by someone associated with creating those really big Sentinel robots. Jean Grey is pregnant with Cyclops' baby. There's no love triangle here. There's no wondering if it's going to be, Wolverine's baby or anything. And at the end of the first episode in Professor Xavier's, last will and testament, he leaves the X-Men to Magneto, who was a bad guy, but went quiet after Professor X died and now is trying to honor his legacy leading the X-Men. A lot to unpack. And I forgot Bishop. Bishop's one of the X-Men characters as well. Well done series. Animation is the same. I think it's a bit more fluid in spots when it comes to maybe the action sequences, but the character models look the same from the original X-Men cartoon. Has a 90s feel sometimes when it comes to dialogue. But those couple story beats, Xavier being dead, the pregnancy, and Magneto taking over the X-Men, all have happened in some manner in the X-Men comic books throughout the decades. So I'm interested to see what the take is for the cartoon. Obviously, introducing it to a wider audience. And if you're out there and you know nothing about the X-Men, they do a really nice job of introducing the characters, what everybody's power is, without it being so blatant. I was hesitant about this series just because knowing, are they going to totally rehash something? I don't remember where the story left off. How are they going to push it forward? They've created some interesting story beats to push forward. And from my understanding, it may only be one season, but it's gotten off to a strong start. Episodes premiere on Wednesdays on Disney+. In addition to the next animated show we're going to talk about, let's transition to Star Wars, The Bad Batch, final season, season 3, latest episode 8, I believe, aired last night on Disney+. And this centers on 3 or 4 defective clone troopers. That's why they're called The Bad Batch, each having a specific ability that didn't really align with how all the clones were kind of, cookie cutter individuals for, used for the Clone Wars. And throughout the series, or early on in the series, they took on a female child crew member named Omega, who it's always been a bit iffy if she's had force powers or not. I think they've subtly hinted that she does. And she was cloned by the Kaminoans on that water planet from, episode 2, Attack of the Clones. And she was revealed to be really the template for the Bad Batch clones. And she jokingly refers to herself as, their mother in this season. But what's even more interesting is this series is trying to connect the dots from episode 2, cloning, and episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, the most recent Star Wars movie where Emperor Palpatine returns. And that whole thing was botched. If you know anything about this, Palpatine's return was announced in the video game Fortnite across platforms, Switch, PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox, whatever. They had a Star Wars skin, and they announced there that Palpatine was returning. Then they say it in the crawl for The Rise of Skywalker to begin the movie. And then there's that throwaway line that people have made a meme of, somehow Palpatine returned. And they never explained how. He gets thrown down the Death Star reactor shaft in Return of the Jedi. Somehow 30 years later, he's back. And cloning is the reason why. And Palpatine, the Emperor, is overseeing this project on Mount Tantus, which is the same location from the early 90s novels, the Timothy Zahn Heir to the Empire Grand Admiral Thrawn trilogy, where clones were used by Grand Admiral Thrawn to help accelerate his rise in the Empire to man starships. They wind up cloning a version of Luke called Luke with 2 U's, 2 or 3 U's. When you read it, that was just kind of like a remnant of early 90s ridiculousness. But what Palpatine is looking for is he's looking for an individual with what they're calling a high enough M count, which is midichlorian count. And I think it's funny that they have not yet used the name midichlorian in this series. And I'm not sure if I don't remember, I should know this, the amount of times I've watched any Star Wars movie, including the prequels, but if they've used the phrase midichlorian anytime after episode 1. I can't recall, and it makes me a bad Star Wars fan, but they're using M count as the phrase, almost like it's a bad word. Like it's something that George Lucas introduced into the Star Wars universe that was very divisive. It took the mysticism, the magic out of the Force, and it wound up being these microscopic beings that live in your bloodstream that allow you to commune with the Force. And the more of these things you have in your blood, the more Force potential or Force power you may have. Absurd. So they say M count. And the female young clone Omega has a high enough M count that it looks like she would be the template for cloning for Palpatine. Because even now, this is what, between episode 3 and 4. I mean, you've seen the Emperor, right? Like he's like a withered up raisin. Like he knows he's on borrowed time. After, zapping Mace Windu with all that Force lightning, you saw his body just kind of shrivel up. So he's thinking ahead. Like, I need to inherit a new body. But it needs to be a body that is Force sensitive, so his essence can reside within a body that is able to use the Force. Because what's the point of being the Emperor or being a Force user if when you're reborn, you can't use the Force anymore? And since the Force is literally a blood-borne, it's not an illness, but a blood-borne thing via these midichlorians, he needs to ensure that clones can be created and live and sustained with a high enough midichlorian count. We'll see where the Bad Batch ends up, because you saw in the beginning of The Rise of Skywalker when Kylo Ren first meets the Emperor, there was a bunch of clones in that tank of Snoke, who was, a clone of Palpatine that he was using as a puppet, and also known as just terrible storytelling by Abrams and company that just didn't know where they were going with stuff. So kudos to Dave Filoni and those in charge at Disney to try to make sense of whatever the hell the sequel trilogy was trying to get across. And the Bad Batch is that bridge to that. But when this series ends, remember, there's still 30 plus years until Palpatine returns. So I am interested to see where they leave the clone processing story once season 3 ends, which is the final season. And last but not least, we're going to end on another Star Wars note. This week, the trailer for the upcoming series, The Acolyte, released, a series that will have a 2-episode premiere beginning of June 1st or June 2nd. And the trailer, of course, I think now on YouTube has more thumbs down than thumbs up, because again, the Star Wars fandom is the worst fandom on the planet. I understand when it comes to anything in life, you can't please everybody all of the time, but holy shit. And there are some people that are excited about this show, and I'm one of them. I watched the trailer 2 or 3 times. I wasn't freeze framing it and analyzing it and breaking it down like a bunch of these dorks are doing, on their video YouTube streams or podcasts or whatever. I think it's interesting. A lot of the assholes out there are saying that it's another woke Disney show with too many females and blah, blah, blah bullshit. Here's what you need to know about it. It takes place 100 years before The Phantom Menace, which means we're going to see Yoda, probably. Just a question of will he be a puppet or will he be totally computer generated? And the Acolyte refers to an Acolyte of the dark side, a dark side user who presumably is causing murders on Coruscant, and the Jedi are called to investigate. And the trailer does have some interesting fight scenes among the actors and actresses. In the Acolyte, Carrie-Anne Moss from Matrix fame is playing a Jedi, and you see quick shots of her battling, whether it is the Acolyte or another dark side Force user. The Force user has a knife, and Carrie-Anne Moss is holding her back using what looks like martial arts moves, but never making contact, just holding her back with the Force, because this Acolyte character is being played by Daphne Keane, who was in, if you watched, and I did see His Dark Materials, that, book trilogy was also adapted by HBO as a series, and she performed really well in that, amongst some other stuff. She was the daughter in Logan. She was X-23. So she's had a pretty good career for being, a young actress. But if she is the Acolyte, and this show is interesting for a couple reasons. One, they've kept this really close to the vest. And you could take a look at this, or you can examine this, to me, in two different ways. One, Disney has had somewhat of a sketchy track record of getting Star Wars projects off the ground. Rogue Squadron announced a movie that was supposed to release last Christmas, 4 months ago, never came to fruition. And now there's some rumors that Patty Jenkins, the writer and director of the first 2 Wonder Woman movies, is back on to finish writing the script for Rogue Squadron. You're not going to hear anything else about that. It is not going into production. It's not part of Disney's slate. Maybe she just owes them a script. Who knows? But there have been a bunch of failed Disney movies. The 2 creators of the Game of Thrones TV series was supposed to have a trilogy. That got nixed. Rian Johnson, who created The Last Jedi, Episode 8, was supposed to have a trilogy. That's never been officially nixed, but that's not happening. Taika Waititi, who directed, was it the last 2 Thor movies, is supposed to have a Star Wars movie, and he's supposed to be working on a script. Who knows if that's going to ever happen? Disney likes to announce things to get their shareholders excited, to increase the share price, at least for the month or quarter, and then just not do anything with it. Either they're very hard critics, they can't get a script right, there's a writer's strike, like there was however many months ago that halted things that were in production, or just plain bad luck. So the fact that the Acolyte has been held so close to the vest, you could look at it as, well, were they lukewarm about this? Did they think maybe it was not going to come to fruition, or maybe something that they didn't like and they just would have canned it? Or, and I'm not an optimist, but I will say this is a very possible or there's something going on with this series that's going to knock our socks off and really surprise us when we watch it. And the creator, showrunner, and director of The Acolyte, I apologize, I forget her name, has come out a couple times and said, whatever you think this show is, it's not. Where or when this show takes place, I said, is 100 years before The Phantom Menace. So I don't think they're going to be doing anything with, Palpatine, who at that point, who knows how old he was? He might have been a teenager. Who knows if he's a senator on Naboo? Who knows if they're going to bring in Darth Plagueis, who at least in Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, was hinted at being a powerful Sith Lord before his apprentice was killed. In the decanonized novel Darth Plagueis, Plagueis was Palpatine's master, and Palpatine wound up learning from him before killing him. Could we see something akin to that, or Darth Plagueis being brought into canon? Another famous Sith Lord from that era or earlier is Darth Tenebris, who again, they don't count any more novels. Darth Tenebris was Darth Plagueis' master. Do we see something like that? It's hard to believe that an Acolyte, which is basically, if you want to, the Sith equivalent of a Padawan, a training person, a dark side trainee, is going to wipe out Jedi hunting for her, and potentially a Jedi Master. There's probably going to be a Jedi Master or two involved in this. And here's where a lot of folks have issue with this. Because if that's the case, how would the Jedi be overcome by a singular Sith trainee? And how would that conflict with what was said in The Phantom Menace by one of the Jedi Masters that, when Darth Maul was revealed, the first time Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan battled him on Tatooine, one of the Jedi Masters said, but the Sith have been extinct for a millennium. So that's making a lot of people believe or say, well, no one with a red lightsaber should ever appear to a Jedi because one of the Jedi Masters in The Phantom Menace has said the Sith have been extinct for a millennium. So obviously there's wiggle room there. Just because you have a red lightsaber doesn't mean you're a Sith or a Sith Lord. You could be a gray Jedi, a fallen Jedi, a dark side user, not necessarily Sith. Because at least I'll define that as, if you're Sith, you're taking a step up in evil force power. But I do go back to what the creator and showrunner said of, whatever you think this show is, it is not. Now, a lot of people, marketers, producers say a lot of things getting people hyped about their show. And there's a lot of Star Wars fans that are out there that are burned saying, after the second season of The Mandalorian, Star Wars shows are garbage, or you want to include Andor on that. And I really liked Andor. The Book of Boba Fett was bad. Obi-Wan Kenobi wasn't any good. I don't like the animated stuff, etc. And yes, there are a variety of ratings from A to maybe a C+ of the Star Wars shows that I've seen on Disney+, but I've watched them all. Even the Tales of the Jedi short, 6, 8, 10-minute vignettes of some Jedi characters of, what their trials and tribulations were like when they were younger. I enjoy them all to a certain degree. Do I have gripes with some of them? Do I nitpick some of them? Of course. But I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Star Wars is my favorite franchise, fantasy intellectual property. Doesn't mean all of it's gold, and not all of it's going to be gold. I mean, things are going to be better to me when I'm, 10 years old. I'm going to respond better to things versus when I'm 20, 30, or 40, right? Like, you just become more mature. Your sensibilities change, your creative sensibilities. You're looking things more of, you're not awestruck by the CGI anymore. You kind of know how the sausage is made. You're more interested in the story and the acting. And if that's not up to par, you don't maybe hold it in as high regard as you would have when you were younger. These are all things that you guys know. But I'm not going to not watch a Star Wars thing out of spite. And I've watched something in the past and say, wow, I didn't think that they would do that. I thought this could be a better story choice. And that's really my gripe with the sequels, episodes 7, 8, and 9. I mean, I've read so many novels that don't count anymore, quote, are not canon, after Return of the Jedi, that it was curious that they took the path that they chose, because there were so many, in my opinion, better character and story avenues they could have went versus what we got. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to watch episode 10. I liked Rey as a character. I like Daisy Ridley as an actress. I will watch the not quite called, but sort of episode 10 whenever that comes out, and any other Star Wars movie and any other Star Wars show. And most of the Star Wars books that are released, I either read or listen to on audiobook. Again, my favorite franchise. And this series, The Acolyte, is going to be, I don't necessarily know if it's from the point of view of the Sith, because you obviously got a heavy Jedi-centric trailer. So maybe it's going to be a 50-50 split between the two factions on how they view things. I don't know. Again, very close to the vest. They released a trailer solely to the people that were at Star Wars Celebration however many months ago. And it's hard to find that trailer online. It does not exist in pure, clean digital form. You would have to find someone who filmed it on their phone while they were at Star Wars Celebration. And I did try to find that and couldn't. It's been scrubbed. And from what I've heard from people who were at Celebration, again, social media, that this trailer contains some elements from that first teaser trailer. Again, very secretive, very close to the vest. I am optimistic. I enjoyed the Ahsoka series. However, that spins off into the next Mandalorian series or movie or Ahsoka season 2. I'm all about it. I'm really all about it. So I'm eager for beginning of June to check out what The Acolyte is, and I hope they peel back more on the Force, lore, Sith, maybe bringing some characters that from the old expanded universe books into canon again. And if it breaks whatever that master from episode 1, Jedi Master, said the Sith have been extinguished for millennium, that fine, so what? I think that's a fertile period to storytell before episode 1, as witnessed by the High Republic series of books that I'm reading and listening to that take place ranging between 500 years before up to 200 years before The Phantom Menace, which was really the peak of the Jedi. My one, not complaint, but constructive criticism about that is during this time, Jedi really are viewed as monks. But they're monks with lightsabers, which says they should be a little bit more battle-hardened than they are depicted in these books. And if that's the case, we'll see what kind of fighting force the Jedi are in the Acolyte. I still don't believe one Sith Acolyte can take down however many Jedi that are going to be gunning for presumably a female. But it's keeping me on my toes wondering what this show is going to be about. And again, usually before episode 7, 8, or 9 came out, months before, Reddit, social media, you go to the right places, people spoiled the movies. I knew the story in full for each of 7, 8, and 9 before I went into theaters. I was not surprised at all, which makes me either a fan that couldn't wait, that wanted to figure out what the movie was going to be, or a bad fan or whatever. You cannot find anything on this series. And there are people that have well-placed sources at Lucasfilm, at Disney, that are leaking stuff. No one's leaking anything about this, which again, I choose to be optimistic, hoping for the best, that they really peel back and give us some new lore, Star Wars and Force and Sith and Jedi lore to chew on in this series. So looking forward to it. But that's going to conclude the podcast for today. Like always, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to make us part of your listening routine. Next podcast will drop next week, it could be any time between Monday and Thursday. Just depends on how much Niners stuff we have to talk about. In addition to any Plus content, I definitely don't want to be in a situation where I feel like I'm padding or pushing to put a podcast together. But again, appreciate you listening. Enjoy March Madness kicking off today, Thursday and Friday. Some of the best sports days throughout the year. From noon to midnight, there's college basketball on. Even though I didn't do a bracket, I'm not wagering any bets on it right now. That's just a pretty cool thing, man. Wall-to-wall basketball. So whatever you're doing, enjoy. Be happy, be healthy, be safe, and we will talk soon. Take care.